Hello there. I thought I'd do this other short video today, and it's in relation to the Singleton Hospital again, where Dr. Evans worked for many years and said he was responsible for bringing up the neonatal unit and developing it. So only 2 years after he leaves, possibly just under 2 years, two babies die of E. coli at that hospital in that neonatal unit, and others are affected as well. Two babies die. One is named. I'll leave the link below from Wales Online. So that happened in 2011. But the coroner, this is important as well, the coroner described the neonatal unit. So that's the neonatal unit that Dr. Evans was so proud of bringing up to a certain level. The coroner described that neonatal unit less than 2 years after Evans has left as poor and outdated. And he also criticised the health board as well. This is at the inquest for one of the poor children that died, the poor babies, Hope Erin Evans, and there was another child that was referred to as baby A1. They died at the city's Singleton Hospital after contracting a deadly and antibiotic-resistant strain of the bacteria called ESBL. As I say, I'll put the link below. And there's some detail here about what the coroner said. You can read the article, obviously, yourself. I'm just going to pause the video. Yes, towards the end of the article, it goes into some detail about what the coroner talks about. This is Mr. Phillips, the coroner. He's describing the facilities at this neonatal unit, which we could call Evans's unit, effectively. He's only just left it. He was obviously instrumental into setting it up as it became, as poor and outdated. Number of sinks were inadequate for the number of cots, and queues formed at peak periods. The space, but this is crucial as well, the space between the cots did not meet current standards, and a central table was used for medical notes. This, I've read in another report that the cots should have been at least 3 meters apart, but whereas they were only 2, so they failed these essential standards, the current standards. Apparently there was good hand hygiene, but obviously that didn't stop this. These are the deaths here. The inquest for baby Hope also heard that the doctors had discovered the mother of baby A had E. coli. They said had they known that, they would have put them in a cubicle on their own. But this is some pretty severe criticism by the coroner about the neonatal unit that Evans often talks about as being this sort of very high level unit, and that's, things would be done differently where he had been, etc. But there's some echoes here. With correlations between this unit here and what's happened here with Chester, of course. There's some echoes in terms of pathogens on the ward, isn't there? Evans would have heard about this story in 2011, would have been highly aware of it, would have read everything about it, would have struck him very strongly. So much so that when he became invited himself into the investigation and effectively ran the investigation with the consultants on behalf of the police, it should have been very high on his list had he been an honest and decent individual and an actual expert and somebody with a scientific approach, a medical science approach. One of his first port of calls would have been, what is the status of pathogens or potential for sepsis and pathogens and everything that might flow from that in this unit? Is that what they've experienced here? But he didn't do any of that, did he? There's no evidence that he did any of that at all. There's no evidence that he did anything to rule that out whatsoever. Whereas Dr. McLachlan's Substacks from last year show as indeed does Dr. Michael McConville's podcasts of this year. They describe signs of sepsis for the vast majority of the babies on the indictment, all through them. And then we've had the revelation this year that there was Pseudomonas aeruginosa in that unit at Chester, all throughout that period, of the so-called indictment period, on the sinks as a chronic problem that never went away. In the interview that John Sweeney did with Evans, John Sweeney puts it to Evans, that had you have known about that, because Evans, well, here's another thing, it just opens up a can of worms. Did the hospital keep it from the police, deliberately hold back, keep it from the police, and thereby from Evans, that there was Pseudomonas aeruginosa on that ward? I can well believe they may well have done that. Or did they let him know and he didn't really care about it? He just put it to one side. You've got Detective Hughes at the beginning of the Hummingbird video, near the beginning, saying, we hope they would come back and tell us it was a bad bug in the water. I mean, it's a risible statement coming from him, because he knows full well that they weren't investigating that. They never investigated bad bugs in waters, or they never considered that a pathogen was behind all this. They were going to create a murderer as quickly and as efficiently as they could, and it took them years to do it, but they still, once they're on that track, they're not interested. They never were interested in anything else at all, any other explanation, because they're corrupt. Everybody involved in this is corrupt. I don't care whether they got themselves to believe in it. I don't care whether they made themselves believe in it. The witch finders of old made themselves believe in it and set people on fire or hanged them. They made themselves believe. I don't care, Look at any tyrant across the world or other serial killers. They believe in what they're doing. Jim Jones believes in what he's doing, where he's getting 1,000 people to take poison. He believes in it. It's not a question of that. It's the fact that what they're doing is evil, and what the collection of this collection of absolutely dangerous people are, the consultants, Evans and the police, is dangerous. Is what they've done is evil. I don't care whether they believe they were doing good. I don't care. I don't see why anyone would care about that. Anyway, I'm gone off on a rant there. What I want to get back to is the fact that had, which he obviously isn't, had Evans been an honest, decent person and not a likely psychopath, it would have been right up in his priority to consider, having known that the hospital, the neonatal ward, had lost 2 babies to E-coli just a few years before, 6 years before, would have been strong in his memory. He would have been proactively asking about all the potential risks there from pathogens on that ward. And then had the NHS been honest with him, and I don't know if they were, and it's quite likely they were not, because that's another pathological setup there, pathological dishonesty. It's quite likely that they held that information back, but it's also likely that they told him and he didn't do anything with it because he didn't care about that, because he's got this one track, as the police have this one-track thing, as Breary and Jairam and the other goons, the other consultant goons, have got a one-track mind, and they're determined to destroy someone. And they can make themselves believe it and feel good about it and construct this fabrication that they're heroes finding this murderer. Doesn't mean that they're not doing something profoundly evil. And now that they must know, even if you could give them some credit to say, well, they were doing an evil thing, but they didn't realise they were doing an evil thing. Now they certainly know it. Now Evans certainly knows it. Now all those consultants certainly know it. Now the police know it. Now the justice system know it, and they've known it for years. And they still want it to stay in place, because they would rather the evil that they've done remain, and the effects of it remain, for Lucy to be in prison for the rest of her life, than they to be shown up for what they've done, for they to be revealed as the dangerous individuals, as the corrupt and dangerous and pathological individuals that they are. And that's what makes them doubly evil individuals, in my view. That's what makes them evil, that there's no way, there's no honour in them, there's no honesty in them, there's no decency in them to say, well, look, we've got Breary here, who must have known that he killed Baby O. And that's what you could see on Dr. Taylor's face at the press conference. Yeah, well, he must have known. If it would have been me, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. That's what, and that's a real statement, as opposed to Jairam's faked up nightmares that he places, he puts in place now, whereas he didn't have them back at the time, did he? Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to keep it to himself for 13 months. That's all faked up. These are fake personas. So, where was I going with that? I don't know if there's any more I want to say about that. It's just the fact that he's got that recent history. I'll put the link below to the E-coli situation. You've got, again, this is the being subject to the rule of lies idea as well, isn't it? That the police, somebody made a comment, I'm sorry, I can't remember exactly, I looked at hundreds of comments today, and very good comments about that, and other people have made it too, I know, about that the police had that video ready to go straight away. It was quite highly produced, and it was all ready to go because they expected it. Because they're not interested in justice or the truth. They had it all ready to go because they knew they'd done enough to get through this vile, corrupt system called a justice system, which is very little to do with justice, of course. So, yeah, we have that. We have Evans should have considered, obviously. We've got that's a very strong point about, or a strong issue about whether the NHS proactively told them, or did they proactively hide the fact that there was Pseudomonas there, or wasn't even bothered to look for. So whatever way you cut it, if they didn't even bother to look for it, i.e. the police using Evans and whomsoever else, it's fundamentally Evans, isn't it? If they didn't even bother to look for it or ask about it, there's so many deficits here, it just all stacks up to something that has no rigor to it, and deliberately no rigor, because it would get in the way of what they're trying to do, which is to frame someone. It doesn't matter whether they thought, well, I'm framing them because it is true, and we've just got to not get anything inconvenient in the way here about one of the most dangerous pathogens you can get. So we don't want to let that intrude, otherwise it will spoil our investigation. But that's the corrupt mind. That's how the corrupt mind thinks, because they're not interested in the truth. And all parties now must know the horror of what they've done, but they're happy for it to continue. I hope they're not happy in terms of I don't think there's any conscience at work here. It's all about self-preservation. And that's what started it all off, the fact that they felt they were going to be blamed for things going wrong, and it was the system as a whole, the hospital as a whole, the whole trust, the whole way that unit was being operated and the way it was failing, that they were going to get the blame for something. So they had to find a scapegoat. It's the same energy. And then that same energy transfers out to the police, to the justice system, to the whole court system, to the whole establishment. It's got that same craven, cowardly attitude. It's about cowardice and the evil that springs from ingrained, chronic cowardice, to not acknowledge responsibility and accountability for what they've done. So they double down on it. And then they punish the innocent person more and more and more, forever if they could. But we're hopefully getting in the way of that. We, as in terms of, obviously, Lucy's new team and everybody that's got their heart fully in this. And that's what the fight against evil is. The fact that it would punish and destroy the innocent in order to hide from its own responsibilities, from its own errors, from its own corruption, its own meannesses, its own psychopathy, to hide that, to pretend to be a hero, to pretend to cry on television like Jairam does, to talk in weighty sentences about there needs to be inquiry so that we can make sure this never happens again. The fakery of all that. the disgusting, slimy fakery of it all, the fakery of the Thirlwall inquiry, with its false grandeur and haughtiness, the haughtiness of a Judge Goss, who doesn't give a damn that an innocent person is in prison for life. There's something missing in these people. It's ingrained in the systems, of course. It's baked into and is the zombie blood of those systems, this corruption, this complete lack of conscience. I consider them psychopathic systems, and they attract many psychopaths. That's not to say everybody involved in them is that. Clearly it's not. They're not. And those people try to do their best within those psychopathic systems. But they're so that psychopathic element, that complete lack of conscience, is so strong and overbearing that it can try to force something like this through, and does. And there's nothing there to stop it. And then Court of Appeal just falls into line and just appeals to empty process over what's obviously an injustice, and happy to do that, and don't lose any sleep over it, aren't kept awake by the idea of that, just will do whatever they can do to say, well, look, I did my job, I followed the process. Cowardice, the rank, disgusting cowardice, the lies that embody that system, that are the material of that system, made of lies, made of corruption, pretending to be authoritative, pretending to be real, pretending to be just and honourable, but being the opposite. I was speaking with my friend recently, but we're living in a world of inversions, which obviously are typified in something like Orwell's book, where you've got the Ministry of Peace. It's actually about war. The Ministry of Truth is about lies. We're living in a world of our systems and our institutions are inverted. Perhaps they always have been to some degree or other, but now it's much more apparent how badly they are. And this awful miscarriage of justice is so emblematic, and just shining a light on the degree of that inversion and the degree of the darkness in our midst, really. I'm not sure if there's anything else I wanted to say about this. I thought it was interesting that had happened at the neonatal unit back in 2011, the Singleton Hospital in Swansea, where Evans had built up that unit. It was later criticised in all sorts of ways by the coroner. And I think I mentioned, I'm a bit tired, I think I mentioned that Evans said to Sweeney, so in that interview he says to Sweeney, well, I don't think I finished that, did I? When he's talking to Sweeney, Evans says, well, if I'd have known there was, I don't think Sweeney puts it to him, well, were you told about this? I think he claims he wasn't told about it. Certainly the court wasn't told about it. Or apparently the defence, the original Myers defence, wasn't told about Pseudomonas aeruginosa on the ward all through that period of time. But in the Sweeney interview with Evans says, well, of course the unit should have been shut down and should have been made sure that it was completely free of Pseudomonas aeruginosa, something like that. It'd be completely free of it. We wouldn't have tolerated it if it would have been my unit I was running. So that's what he says to Sweeney. But now we've got an example of the unit that he built up only less than 2 years after he leaves it. It's criticised by the coroner in all these different ways, and 2 babies have died there of E-coli. Another correlation here is that the unit, when that did happen at the Singleton Hospital, they, for a certain period of time, they were only allowing full-term babies to be there, and there wouldn't be any premature babies there for a time. And then they spent X numbers of millions of pounds to improve the service and improve the facilities there, which again is what happened at Chester. There's a lot of echoes here between Singleton in 2011 and what's happened at Chester. But the number of babies who fell victim to a mixture of failures of care, medical negligence, right up to the point of killing a baby, as in relation to Baby O and what Breary did, and possibly with others as well that we're waiting to hear about, that are being looked into very, very, very deeply by all the experts on Mark McDonald's team. A mixture of that and the pathogens on the ward and the failure of staffing levels and the lack of senior cover. There's a whole list you can go through, which I always keep coming back to Alison Timmis's email, which it's concentrated in the description is concentrated in her email, in which she just says very simply, it's not safe and children are going to die. And she says that in December 2015. And she's not talking about murderers. She's talking about a system that's not able to operate safely at all, obviously. And that nobody's listening to her or them or anybody. Again, Alison Timmis, very highly conspicuous by her absence, both in the trial and also in the Thirlwall, as far as I know. So there you have it. The irony of Evans saying that, well, was he told about Pseudomonas at Chester, and deliberately put it to the side. The fakery, I'm going to keep repeating, I'll have to stop soon, but it's just the fakery of Hughes saying, I was hoping he was going to tell me, knowing that they weren't looking along those tracks at all. On what basis was he hoping for that? There's a bad bug in the water. On what investigations did they do around that? So it's either them doing it, it's not them doing it, or it's them asking for that to be done, or Evans asking for that to be done. So where's the evidence that that was done? It's only the defence bringing the plumber in. It's not. It's only that happening, isn't it? And why on earth did that not come up at the trial? Are we talking really here about the cover-up of the NHS, of that aspect of it? That should be enough for a retrial in and of itself. Just that alone. Just that alone. In a decent world, in a decent system, in an honourable system. The fact that the NHS kept the truth, the fact that Pseudomonas aeruginosa was on that unit all through that period of time, if that is indeed what happened, if they deliberately kept it from the defence, they hid it, then that should be enough for a retrial in and of itself. It might be that they neither kept it, they neither hid it, nor that they neither hid it nor pushed it forward to them. In that case, it's a failure of the defence to not proactively ask about all that and get that information proactively in their discovery process and their research process of what was going on in that hospital. It should have been incumbent upon them to find out that information, and the only way that you could excuse the defence is if the NHS deliberately held it back from them, and I can quite imagine them doing that as well, because there's corruption in every direction here, and it's all about the arrogance and the dishonourable nature of organisations and individuals protecting themselves and being happy for an innocent person to be destroyed and be ruined, and their lives ruined, and their lives stolen from them, and their opportunities stolen from them, and then playing the hero, and then playing at the serious, that they all feel wounded by it, when they know it's their fault, they know it's the hospital that is responsible, and that the doctors are responsible, and they're all playing this fake theatre. I'm interested in Dr. B. I got an email this morning where I was told that who Dr. B might be. I know there's a court order about it, but I don't know if that is the case. I think there's a lot to talk about these aspects, isn't there? And I'm interested in Dr. B now, more than I was before in relation to baby Noah, the death of baby Noah in 2014, and how that might link potentially with the decision to start scapegoating an innocent person. But I'll think about that more and need to read, doing some FOIs, and also will need to read over Dr. B, or Dr. V as she's called, at Thirlwall. So it's B goes to V, A goes to U, Dr. A becomes A, Dr. U. It's just all bizarre, isn't it? Yes. What is the impact of what's the motivation of Dr. B? How does that fit into Breary's drawer of doom, into this collection of quite sinister individuals that end up being called the Gang of Four? Dishonest, people without I can't think of the word, without honour, without integrity, people without integrity. Are they sleeping well at night? Jairam's nightmares etched into his mind. If he is having nightmares, is it because he knows what he's done? And is there some conscience in him? Is there any conscience in Evans? I doubt it. Is there any conscience in Breary? Well, there didn't seem to be over baby O. He can actually kill a baby through a medical error. And have somebody, this is what we're talking about there, and have somebody pay for that, as though that other person had done a murder. He can live with that. Brewery can live with that. That was such a watershed meeting, that conference, that press conference, when that came out about Brewery and Baby O. To know what we're dealing with here. Brewery can live with that knowledge and carry on working as a doctor and have people working with him. How does anybody work with him after hearing that? How do they do it? Why would you do it? He should be out with immediate effect. People should say, I'm not working with this individual. And that applies to all of them involved. But we'll see what happens, and as things go forward, obviously on the 8th, David Davis and the parliamentary debate, and then hearing about the result of the applications that Mark McDonald has put in, both to the Court of Appeal and the CCRC. I think they went in the same week, didn't they? And I'm just interested in Dr. B stroke V and baby Noah, and what that might have set in train, potentially. Obviously, it's very limited what we can find out, and other people are obviously much closer to it, and they are getting. There's leakage from people working in the hospital, which is good, isn't it? And people who have worked in the hospital. But anyway, I'll leave it there, and take care. It's just, every now and again, it just hits you again, the horror of it. And there's more to come, really, in terms of the more revelations to come. It's not, these aren't really, I don't feel these are so much surprises. It's just, we kind of suspect that all this is going on all the time in all kinds of different ways, in different places and different institutions. And it's just about, most of the time, they get away with covering things up. And just things are being revealed here because there's such a spotlight on them. And there's a kind of natural law aspect there, that they put such a spotlight on an innocent person, but now it's turned back on them. The spotlight is turned on those consultants. It's turned on Evans. It's turned on the police. It's turned on the criminal justice system as a whole. That's where our focus and our spotlight is directed now. And that's why I was thinking about it the other day. I don't want to be too referential about videos that I do or whatever, but I don't use pictures of Lucy Letby. I don't. It's not about her or her private life, because they made her into they created something that wasn't her, and then they put that something that wasn't her into prison. But actually they're putting the innocent person into prison. They created a phantom. They created something that was nothing to do with her at all. But they used her. They used the real person to punish. What they've done is monstrous. And what they are, as some of the individuals concerned there's an abyss within them. There's a moral abyss. There's a complete vacancy of morality in these people. Brewery can know that his actions, I'm not saying they're deliberate. He's obviously not a very good doctor, and perhaps he's killed other babies, perhaps. He's certainly killed one then, hasn't he, according to Dr. Taylor. And he's so cowardly and has so little responsibility, and is so dangerous that he would rather cover that up and let somebody else take the blame and turn it into a story where somebody else saying that somebody murdered that baby. That makes him an absolute abyss in which there is no conscience whatsoever, is there? There's no conscience whatsoever in someone like that. And there's no conscience in a Jayaram that can then fake up tears, whereas at the time, he just blithely kept it to himself for 13 months. Then he has to recreate this story all this time later. And he's a half-decent actor. But then once you see all the joins, then it's even more sickening, the narcissism that drips off him. As for Evans, he is a force for I don't know what he is. I don't know what Evans is. He's malignant. He is the kind of person that would, in the witch trial days, people, for various reasons, often for jealousy, or they wanted someone's land, or they're just bullies. They pointed out certain people as witches out of a kind of a bullying instinct, or because they wanted something from them, or whatever the reason was. Could be quite a small reason. And Evans is the kind of the official that comes through, the Matthew Hopkins type of person. And he's the one with the absolute surety, and that's why he can never be wrong. And that's a very sinister individual. And that's equally someone totally and utterly without a shred of conscience. And what is such a person? A psychopath. And we're sharing the world with quite a lot of them at the moment. And there probably has always been quite a lot of them, but we're seeing quite a concentration of them in this case. And we're seeing psychopathic institutions and all the facets of that psychopathy laid bare in your face, in your grill. And the spotlight is being shone on it all. Thank you. Good night.